Ready?
Ready, Captain.
Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new season of Sailing Fujin. My name is Trevor and behind me is my 1981 Catalina 30. We're kicking off this year with an episode just about grab rails. Yes, they are well overdue, as you can see here. We got a little behind with maintenance on the woodwork, but we're tackling that in this week's episode. A little disclaimer here, I am not a professional, we are DIYers, but for this project we took it very thoroughly, we went step by step, we went very slowly, and we did everything the right way. So if you guys tackle a project like this and you follow exactly what we did, I think you'll be very happy with the outcome of your grab rails, and you will definitely not have any leaks whatsoever. Before we get the video started, I wanted to give a shout out to my friend Holly. She donated a Blue Yeti microphone for us. It will enhance our voiceover quality for our videos, so I really appreciate that, Holly. Thank you very much. All right guys, without further ado, let's just jump right in there and get the video started. Okay, so we're below deck and we're looking at the overhead here, and we got different types of fasteners that are holding the grab rails down. Every other one is a through bolt and every other one is a screw. I wanted to show you guys at the most forward part of the grab rail, we had a through bolt holding it on. Now that through bolt actually completely corroded through, and the head of it came off, so it was not holding it down at all. So that's kind of what made me feel like it was time to do this project, to like check the other through bolts and see if they had corroded through too. Before we check out the through bolts, we're obviously going to have to take everything apart, get it all loose, and yeah, we'll go from there. Aha! Who is this, you may ask? Do you remember last season when we went to Newport and that bird lady gave us a tour of her swamp? Yep, that is her, and she is now officially part of the Fujin fighter crew. Her name is Julie, and she has become quite the sailor in the last few months, and you'll probably be seeing a lot more of her. Okay, so we're on the top side of the boat here. We're looking at our grab rail, and we're going to take it off momentarily. But before we do, if you remember that corroded bolt we pulled out of the front of the grab rail, well, that goes right in here. And we can't really access that head of the bolt because it is sealed in what is called a bung, which is a wooden plug that kind of just goes into the teak and seals off that bolt. So since it's sealed, we can't really get to the head of the bolt. So what we're going to have to do is drill out the bung so we can pull it out. So that's what we're going to do now. Drilling out the old bung to get access to the top of the through bolt is a very delicate process. We started with a very small drill bit and eventually worked our way up to the full size of the bung hole. Let me make a note that that will not be the last bung joke of this video. After scraping the old silicone, we still had trouble getting the head off the through bolt out. So we decided we would just take the grab rail off first so we could just dump it out after. Now that we removed the screws and removed the nuts from the through bolts, the only thing that was holding the rail on was the silicone sealant. All it took was a little wiggling back and forth and some elbow grease, and the rails popped right off. You got it?
Amazing. It's off.
After getting the rails off, we took them over to the dock and turned the starboard rail upside down and gave her a little shake. Sure enough, the head of the through bolt came out, and we now had a better understanding of what was going on underneath these bungs. Okay, so we got our grab rails off the deck and they're sitting here on the dock. What I'm trying to do is not take these bolts out. I'm trying to leave them in there, and hopefully we can just put them back the way they are. but I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I'm hoping that they don't spin when we try to tighten them up again. I'm not really sure exactly yet how they sit inside this handrail, but I guess we're going to find out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to clean this up a little bit. We're going to wrap the bolts in tape so we don't damage the threads while we're messing around with them, because the last thing we want to do is damage these threads and have to replace more of these bolts. As of now, we only have to replace the one. The next step will be just cleaning up the deck, cleaning up around where we had these handrails sealed, and yeah, so we're going to do that right now. It goes without saying that removing old silicone is a straight up pain in the ass. We started off with acetone, which barely did anything. Then we moved to using fingernails and cheap plastic scrapers, which also did next to nothing. After struggling with these primitive methods, we eventually moved to carefully, and I mean very carefully, sanding the surface down with 120 grit sandpaper. Okay, so Julie and I have spent the better part of the day removing the silicone off the deck here. So our next step is going to be what we call the drill, fill, and re-drill method. So why we're doing this is basically to protect and seal the inside of the hole, which prevents any water from getting into the balsa wood core here. So what we do is we're going to drill a little bit bigger of a hole where there is already a hole in the deck, and then after that we fill it with epoxy resin, and then we drill the hole the original size of the hole again. So that's why when we actually make that hole, it's going to have that epoxy wall, which pretty much prevents any water from getting into that balsa core. So let's just go ahead and start drilling those holes. Wow, I think I said the word hole about 20 times there. If you didn't understand that rudimentary explanation of the drill, fill, drill method, don't worry, you'll get it by the end of this video. Anyway, Julie and I began preparing for drilling operations. All right, here I go.
Yep, ready when you are.
Okay, I'm gonna skip the next one. You ready? Okay. Ready? Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. Next. Ready?
Ready, Captain.
Okay, here we go. Go.
Yep.
Ready? Okay. Ready? Okay. After drilling all of the through holes one size larger than the original hole sizes, we attach the countersink bit and countersink all the holes. Doing this ensures spider cracks will not form in the paint, and it will also leave a nice divot for the silicone sealant to settle into. Alright everybody, well we kind of ran out of time there. We got the holes drilled to the sizes we wanted to, but we didn't have time to fill them with the epoxy resin. Unfortunately, Julie had to take off and the wind picked up a little. And it's never fun doing epoxy jobs when the wind is up a little bit, because you're just going to kind of make a mess. And so I decided not to rush it, and we're going to wait till tomorrow to inject those holes full of epoxy. So we'll see you all then. Okay, it is the next day, and we're going to start filling the holes in the deck with epoxy. So we're using West Systems here today. And we got our 105 epoxy resin, then we got our 206 hardener, and then we got a filler here. So what this does is kind of expands the resin and makes it more thick. So yeah, we mix these all together in a bucket, and then we're going to use these syringes that we got here to inject the epoxy into the hole in the deck. So yeah, let's see how it goes. So I began taping the underside of the holes in the deck with duct tape. I would absolutely recommend a heavy-duty tape, definitely not blue painter's tape. Once epoxy gets on something, it is not coming off, and you sure as hell don't want it dripping down into your cabin. So I started mixing the epoxy. When it comes to epoxy, there are basically two leading brands, Total Boat and West System. I chose West System because my friend Landon donated his can of West System's resin to me, and there are a few other YouTubers who use it, so I am more familiar with their products. West System is also super user-friendly. They make it really easy to figure out what to mix, how to mix it, and how much to use. They also have one of the best customer technical support lines I have ever seen, as you can call and talk to an expert with pretty much zero wait time. They are always super friendly and super knowledgeable and happy to offer advice for your project. So I whipped up some thickened epoxy and began the injection process. However, it didn't take long for things to start going wrong. The thickened epoxy started smoking and became extremely hot. So hot I couldn't even touch the bucket. I almost had to run and jump off the boat because the bucket was so hot. After consulting the people of the sailing sub on Reddit, there were 3 possible scenarios of why this may have happened. Scenario 1, the epoxy had a chemical reaction with the syringes I purchased from Home Depot. Scenario 2, I mixed too much filler too fast into the epoxy. And scenario 3, it overheated from being in the hot sun. As I was running out of time, I decided to eliminate all variables. First, I went to West Marine and picked up some West Systems brand of syringes. Then after mixing the epoxy, I kept it out of the sun for most of the time. So was it the syringes or was it the sun? I can't really be sure, but if I was a betting man, I would put my money on the harsh heat from the sun. So after mixing up a second batch of thickened epoxy, I made another attempt at filling up the holes. No smoking bucket this time, but that wouldn't mean that more problems wouldn't arise. I am such an idiot. I forgot to tape one single hole. And of course, what was beneath that hole? My backpack was sitting right beneath it, completely open. So if you take a look in here, luckily it dripped right down and landed into that paint bucket right there. I don't think it got anywhere else, but I'm just gonna let it sit there for a little bit and cure before I put my hands down there. But I guess I'm kind of lucky a little bit that it landed in the bucket. I mean, what are the f***ing odds of that, you know? Oh my god. Yeah, that's the hole right there that I missed. And it went straight down into that bucket right there. All over the bungs I just bought. Covered the bungs. Good thing they were in a package. After retaping the hole, I went ahead and finished filling the rest of the holes with thickened epoxy. The epoxy ended up having a lot of air bubbles in it, which was very concerning. Once again, I contacted the sailing community of Reddit to get their opinion on it. Most people said it would be fine since the epoxy is not structural, and it would still shield the balsa wood core from water intrusion. To prevent this from happening again, I was told to place a gloved finger over the tip of the syringe while sucking up the epoxy into it. This would somehow prevent air bubbles from entering the syringe. Disclaimer, I have yet to try this method. This is just what someone on the internet told me. Good afternoon, everybody. We are here in Julie's backyard right now, kind of using it as a staging area to do our sanding for the grab rails and the deck for the cockpit. So provides a nice shaded area. It's not very fun to do it out on the dock when there's no protection from the sun. So we're going to be working at this for a few hours just manually. So here we go. I won't bore you with too many details on the sanding. There really isn't too much to it. All you have to do is make sure you do it by hand and go with the grain of the wood. We did one pass on everything with 120 grit paper and a final pass on everything else with 220. The next day, we started prepping the teak for the oiling and sealing process. We first touched up some certain spots on the wood that we missed with 220 grit paper. We also made sure to sand off all the old silicone that was stuck to the bottom of the grab rails. After we finally completed our sanding, we rinsed all the dust off the rails. We then used a Teak Cleaner, which was said to bring out highlights in the grain of the wood. The product we used was Teak Cleaner made by Starbright, and I think it did a pretty good job. We gave the teak a good scrub with the soft side of some sponges and the Teak Cleaner, rinsed it off thoroughly, and then set them out to dry. The grab rails did not take long to dry in the blistering hot sun. Once they were fully bone dry, it was time to put on the first coat of Teak Sealer. We chose Starbright Classic Color Teak Sealer, as this is what the previous owner used on all of the rest of the teak on the boat. No, we are not sponsored by Starbright, they just happen to make good products that are easy to come by. The product recommends using foam brushes to apply the sealer on the teak, which we did. We slapped on 4 coats of Teak Sealer on the rails in one day, as each coat only took about half an hour to be tack-free. It is important to follow the grain as you apply the sealer and do very light coats. Okay guys, it is the next day. Our grab rails have been sealed and they're ready to be mounted on deck here. Now the next step is to complete the drill fill drill process. A while ago when we initially drilled out these holes on the deck, we drilled them a little bit wider so we could fill it up with epoxy resin. Now what we're going to do is actually drill the holes again, and that way there'll be an epoxy resin kind of seal around the balsa wood core, so that way if there is a leak, there won't be water getting into the core of the boat. So what we're going to do now is just get in there and start drilling those holes, and we'll go from there. The holes would be drilled to different sizes, since half of them would be housing screws and half of them would be housing through bolts. To ensure we drilled to the correct size holes, we labeled each one with a B for bolt and S for screw. To make sure we drilled in the dead center of the epoxy filled hole, we used a center punch to accurately mark the drill point center. Then it was back to the old familiar and tedious drilling process. Next one. We started off with a small drill bit, eventually working our way up to the size of the through bolt and screws. It took about a total of 3 stages of drilling to complete the process. After a little cleanup of the fiberglass mess we made, we crossed our fingers and began dry fitting the grab rails.
Truth, baby.
Line up your holes, gentlemen. With a little gentle hammering with our fists, the port grab rail slid on fairly nicely. We then installed the new through bolt in the starboard grab rail and began dry fitting that one. Start from the middle, right? Alright, so the rail has been dry fitted. It's looking pretty good. So now we're going to back it back out just a little bit, keep the bolts inside the holes, and then we're going to seal it with silicone. We'll also put down a tarp on the interior so no silicone drips down onto the interior. And yeah, we had one little issue with this bung getting pushed out. We pushed the bung. We pushed the bung. We pushed the bung. But that'll be an easy fix. We could just reseal that in there and no biggie. To seal the grab rails to the deck, we chose to use Boat Life's clear silicone. A lot of people recommend using butyl tape to seal grab rails. Butyl tape is a really great way to seal a lot of deck fittings, especially ones that have slight movement such as chain plates. However, butyl tape tends to fail when exposed to harsh chemicals and oils. Since we'll be oiling this teak frequently, we thought it would be best to use silicone instead. Here you can see Julie wiping up silicone with a rag. I urge you not to do this. All this did was spread a thin layer of silicone around the deck, which is impossible to get off. The best way and only way to get silicone off the deck is to not make a mess in the first place. After seating the grab rails from the top side, it was time to fasten them down. We fastened all the through bolts first with their nuts. After we finished tightening all the through bolts, we started putting in the screws. To make sure they went in properly, Julie pushed down on the top of the grab rail while I screwed them in from down below. To my surprise, all of them lined up to their old screw holes with no issues. Now it was time to seal away the through bolt that started this entire project. I coated the edges of the hole with silicone sealant as well as the top side of the bolt. Then I grabbed a new bung and put it into the bung hole. It did not exactly fit perfectly, so I gently hammered it in with a mallet. You have to be very careful doing this because you could easily split the teak grab rail. If I were to do this again, I would probably try sanding down the bung to make it smaller instead. I then rubbed silicone into the gaps around the bung. I wasn't worried about the cosmetic look here since we were going to sand this section back down anyway to remove the excess bung sticking out. With the bung hole now sealed, we could finally call the project complete and bask in the glory of what I think was a job well done. Looks like that's going to be it for this week's episode, guys. If you'd like to support our YouTube channel, you could simply hit that like button, and you could also subscribe to our channel to see more upcoming sailing content. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and we'll see you all next episode.